Emily Carter had spent 28 years believing she knew who she was. A receptionist at the Grandview Hotel in Portland, she lived a quiet, predictable life. But on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in October, everything changed when she found a forgotten diary wedged behind the mahogany reception desk. The leather cover was cracked with age, the pages yellowed and brittle. Inside were fragments of someone else's memories, or so she thought. What Emily didn't know was that this diary would unravel everything she believed about her past, force her to question everyone around her, and lead her on a journey that would reveal the most shocking truth of her life.
Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The rain hammered against the tall windows of the Grandview Hotel lobby, creating rivers that distorted the Portland streetlights beyond. Emily wiped down the marble reception desk for the third time that evening, her movements mechanical after 6 years of the same routine. Tuesday nights were always slow. The hotel, a renovated Victorian building in the Pearl District, attracted mostly business travelers during the week, and by 8 p.m., most guests were either in their rooms or out exploring the city's restaurant scene. Emily had never imagined herself working at a hotel. She had studied graphic design in community college, harboring dreams of working for an advertising agency or maybe starting her own freelance business. But life had a way of redirecting plans. Her adoptive mother had fallen ill during her final semester, medical bills had piled up, and the steady paycheck from the Grandview had been too reliable to refuse. That was 6 years ago. Her mother had passed 3 years later, and somehow Emily had never left. She glanced at the clock. 8:15. David Chen, the hotel manager, had already retreated to his office on the second floor to handle paperwork. The lobby was empty except for the soft jazz playing through hidden speakers and the rhythmic tick of the antique grandfather clock near the elevator. Emily bent down to retrieve a fallen pen from beneath the desk, and that was when she saw it. Wedged in the narrow gap between the desk's back panel and the wall was a small book. She reached for it, her fingers brushing away decades of accumulated dust. The diary was bound in dark leather, worn smooth in some places and cracked in others. No name marked the cover. Curiosity overcame professional protocol. Emily opened the diary carefully, mindful of its fragile pages. The first entry was dated March 15, 1987. The handwriting was elegant, but hurried, as though the writer had been racing against time or emotion. "Today I held her for the last time," the entry began. "They say it's for the best, that she'll have opportunities I can never give her. But how do you explain to a 6-month-old baby why her mother is giving her away? She has my eyes, brown with flecks of gold when the light hits them just right, and that birthmark on her left wrist, shaped like a crescent moon. I memorized every detail of her face, every tiny finger, every soft breath. Her name is Emma. I chose it because it means whole or universal, and I pray she'll grow up feeling complete, even without me. I pray she'll never know the hollow ache I feel right now. The adoption agency says the family is good, stable, loving, financially secure, everything I'm not. But they can't love her more than I do. That's impossible. I'm writing this down because I can't trust my memory. Pain has a way of blurring details, and I refuse to forget her faith. This diary is all I have left. Someday, maybe she'll want to know about me. Maybe she'll understand why I had to let her go." Emily's hands trembled as she held the diary. The page was stained with what looked like old tears, the ink smudged in places. She checked the date again. March 1987. The same year she was born. The same month. She set the diary down on the desk and pulled up her left sleeve. There on her wrist was a birthmark she had carried her entire life, shaped like a crescent moon. The lobby suddenly felt too quiet, the silence pressing against her ears. Emily's heart pounded as she flipped through more pages. The entries were sporadic, written over the course of several months following the adoption. The writer, the mother, described working as a housekeeper at a hotel in Portland. The Grandview Hotel. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She looked around the lobby as if seeing it for the first time. The ornate ceiling medallions, the vintage light fixtures, the wide marble staircase leading to the upper floors. This building had stood here for over a century. The writer worked here, in this very building. She read on, her hands growing colder with each page. The mother wrote about financial struggles after her husband died in a construction accident, about choosing between feeding herself and paying rent, about the impossible decision to give up her daughter so the child could have a better life. The entries grew darker, more desperate. Then they stopped. The last entry was dated August 3, 1987. I can't keep working here. Every day I walk these halls, I see her ghost. I imagine her growing up somewhere safe, somewhere warm, with parents who can give her everything. But it's killing me. I need to leave Portland. I need to forget, even though I know I never will. This diary is my confession, my memorial, my punishment. If Emma ever finds this, if she ever wants to know, I worked at the Grandview Hotel. I was nobody special, just a housekeeper trying to survive. But I loved her. God, I loved her so much. That has to count for something. Emily closed the diary and pressed it against her chest. Her mind raced through possibilities, through coincidences too significant to ignore. Could this be real? Could this diary belong to her biological mother? She had always known she was adopted. Her adoptive parents, the Carters, had never hidden that fact. They had been loving, supportive, everything good parents should be. But they had known very little about her biological mother, only that she was young, alone, and had chosen adoption voluntarily. The adoption had been handled through an agency that had since closed. Emily had tried searching for information when she turned 18, but the trail had gone cold immediately. The desk phone rang, shattering her thoughts. Emily jumped, nearly dropping the diary. She answered with a shaky voice. It was David. He needed her to check on a guest in room 304. Margaret Sullivan, an elderly woman who had been staying at the hotel for the past week, had called down earlier requesting extra towels, but David had forgotten to send them up. Could Emily take care of it? Emily agreed, her voice sounding distant even to her own ears. She gathered a set of towels from the supply closet, tucked the diary carefully into her cardigan pocket, and headed for the elevator. What Emily didn't know was that Margaret Sullivan had been waiting for this moment for 37 years, and the truth waiting in room 304 would shatter everything Emily thought she knew about the diary, her past, and the woman who wrote those heartbroken words. Because sometimes the most painful truths aren't about what happened, they're about who's been lying all along.
The elevator climbed slowly to the third floor, its mechanical hum filling the small space. Emily's mind churned with questions. Should she mention the diary to this guest? Was it even Margaret Sullivan's? The timing seemed too convenient. The diary, hidden for decades, suddenly discovered the same week an elderly woman checked in for an extended stay. The third-floor hallway was dimly lit, its carpet muffling Emily's footsteps. Room 304 was at the far end, near the window overlooking the street. Emily knocked softly, clutching the towels in one hand. The door opened almost immediately, as if Margaret had been waiting just on the other side. The woman was shorter than Emily expected, perhaps 5'3", with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a cardigan over a simple dress, and her eyes, brown with flecks of gold, met Emily's with startling intensity. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Margaret's gaze traveled from Emily's face down to her hands, lingering on the towels. Then her eyes moved lower, to the edge of the diary poking out from Emily's pocket. Margaret's face went pale. Her hand gripped the doorframe for support. Emily noticed the reaction immediately. Her professional training told her to ask if the woman was all right, but something deeper, some instinct she couldn't name, made her pull the diary from her pocket instead.
Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I found this behind the reception desk. It's yours, isn't it?" Margaret nodded slowly, unable to speak. She stepped back, gesturing for Emily to come inside. The hotel room was modest but comfortable: a queen bed, a small desk, a wing-back chair by the window. Personal items cluttered the desk surface: photographs, documents, what looked like old letters. Margaret moved to the chair and sat down heavily, as if her legs would no longer support her. Emily remained standing near the door, still holding both the towels and the diary. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Margaret finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "I left it here, 37 years ago. I shoved it behind that desk before I walked out of this building for what I thought would be the last time. I wanted to destroy it, but I couldn't, so I hid it instead." Emily's throat tightened. "You worked here." "I was a housekeeper. 23 years old, widowed, broke and broken. I wrote about my daughter, about giving her up, about the worst decision I ever had to make." Emily's fingers trembled as she extended her left arm, pulling back her sleeve. The crescent moon birthmark was clearly visible against her pale skin. "I'm 28. I was born in March 1987. I was adopted, and I have this." Margaret stood up so quickly the chair scraped against the floor. She crossed the small room in 3 strides and grabbed Emily's wrist, examining the birthmark with shaking hands. Tears streamed down her weathered cheeks. "Emma," she whispered. "My Emma." Emily wanted to feel something: joy, recognition, connection. But instead, a cold dread settled in her stomach. Something was wrong. The way Margaret had been waiting, the way this felt too orchestrated, too perfect. "How did you know?" Emily asked, pulling her arm back. "How did you know I worked here?" Margaret wiped her eyes, confusion crossing her face. "I didn't. I came back to Portland to find the diary. I saved for years, searched through old employment records, tracked down the hotel. I checked in a week ago, spent every night trying to figure out how to search the building without arousing suspicion. I was going to ask the manager to explain everything. But then I saw you at the desk that first day I checked in, and I saw your wrist when you handed me the room key. That birthmark. I knew immediately." "You've been here a week. You saw my birthmark a week ago. Why didn't you say anything?" "I was scared. I'm scared you'd reject me, scared you'd hate me for giving you up. I needed time to find the right words, to figure out how to explain why I did what I did." Emily backed toward the door. The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. "This doesn't make sense. You abandoned a diary that could identify you, and then 37 years later, you just happen to come back the same week I find it? What are the odds?" "It's fate," Margaret said desperately. "Don't you see? The universe brought us back together. You were meant to find that diary. We were meant to find each other." But Emily's mind was working too quickly now, processing details she had initially overlooked. The diary was dusty, really dusty, like it hadn't been touched in decades. "But you said you were a housekeeper here. This building has been renovated at least twice since the 80s. That desk was probably moved, replaced, or refinished. How did the diary stay hidden through all that?" Margaret's expression shifted, something flickering behind her eyes. "I don't know. Does it matter? What matters is we found each other. You've been in Portland for a week, but you didn't check into this hotel until a week ago. Where were you before that? How long have you actually been in the city?" Margaret's silence was answer enough. Emily felt sick. "You put the diary there, recently. You staged this entire thing." "No," Margaret said, but the word lacked conviction. "Why?" demanded. "Why would you do this? If you're really my mother, why not just tell me? Why this elaborate setup?" Margaret sank back into the chair, her face crumbling. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Because I needed you to find it on your own. I needed you to come to me. If I had just walked up to you and said I was your mother, you would have asked questions. You would have demanded proof. But if you found the diary, if you thought it was fate, you'd want to believe. Believe what? Emily's voice was cold now. What exactly did you want me to believe? Margaret looked up, and Emily saw desperation in those brown eyes, eyes that did look remarkably like her own. That I loved you, that giving you up destroyed me, that I never stopped thinking about you. Is any of it true? Emily asked. Are you even my mother? Yes, Margaret said fiercely. That part is real. The DNA test I secretly paid for confirmed it. I am your biological mother. I did work here. I did give you up for adoption. The diary entries are real. I wrote them in 1987. I just didn't leave the diary here back then. I kept it all these years. I brought it with me to Portland and planted it behind the desk 2 weeks ago. I paid the previous receptionist $20 to look the other way while I hid it. Emily felt dizzy. 2 weeks ago? You've been planning this for 2 weeks? Longer, Margaret admitted. I've been planning this for 5 years, ever since I found you. The room tilted. 5 years? You've known where I was for 5 years? Margaret nodded miserably. I hired a private investigator when I finally had enough money saved up. It took him 6 months to track you down through adoption records and DNA databases. I've been watching you, Emily. I know you work here. I know you live alone in that apartment on Morrison Street. I know you get coffee at the same cafe every morning. I know everything about you. Emily backed against the wall, her breath coming in short gasps. This wasn't a reunion. This was stalking. I wanted to approach you so many times, Margaret continued, standing slowly, her hands extended in a placating gesture. But I was scared. You had a life, a routine. What if you didn't want a relationship with me? What if you were angry about the adoption? I couldn't bear the rejection, so I waited. I planned. I wanted to create a moment that would make you want to know me. A moment where you'd feel the connection I felt. The diary was perfect. It was authentic. Those entries are real. I just staged the discovery. Get away from me, Emily said, her voice shaking. You're not my mother. You're a stranger who's been stalking me for 5 years. That's not love. That's obsession. Please, Margaret begged, tears streaming down her face. I know I went about this the wrong way, but everything I wrote in that diary is true. I did love you. I did make the hardest choice of my life when I gave you up. I thought you'd have a better life without me. You don't get to decide that now, Emily said, her hand finding the door handle. You don't get to manipulate me into some fantasy reconciliation. Whatever relationship we might have had, you destroyed it the moment you started lying. She pulled open the door. Wait, Margaret said desperately. There's something else, something you need to know about your adoption, about why I really gave you up. Emily paused, every instinct screaming at her to leave, but curiosity rooting her in place. Margaret moved to the desk and picked up a manila folder. The adoption agency told me you'd go to a stable, loving family. They told me they'd been vetted, that they were perfect, but they lied. Your adoptive father had a criminal record they covered up. He'd been investigated for fraud multiple times. The agency placed you with them anyway because they paid extra, a lot extra. Emily's blood ran cold. That's not true. My father was a good man. Was he? Margaret held out the folder. Look at these documents. Court records. Investigation reports. He died when you were 12, right? Car accident? Yes, Emily whispered. The brake line was cut. It wasn't an accident. It was murder. Someone he'd frauded finally got revenge. Emily's world spun. She grabbed the folder, scanning the documents inside. Police reports, court filings, newspaper clippings. Her father's name appeared again and again, connected to financial fraud, embezzlement, schemes that ruined families. No, this couldn't be real. Her father had been kind, gentle, always there for her and her mother. He taught her to ride a bike, help with homework, attended every school event. He couldn't have been a criminal. But the documents looked authentic. Dates, case numbers, official seals. Emily looked up at Margaret, who watched her with an expression Emily couldn't quite read. Sympathy? Satisfaction? Why are you showing me this? Emily asked. Because you deserve to know the truth, Margaret said. About everything. About who your adoptive parents really were. About why the life you thought you had was built on lies.
And you're the hero in the story? Emily's voice dripped with sarcasm. You're the one who's been honest. No, Margaret admitted. I'm not a hero. I'm a desperate woman who made terrible choices trying to reconnect with her daughter. But at least I'm telling you the truth now. Emily stared at the documents, then at the diary still in her hand, then at Margaret's tear-stained face. Nothing made sense anymore. Who could she trust? What was real? But Emily was about to discover that Margaret's revelations were only the beginning, because downstairs in the hotel lobby, David Chen was making the phone call that would expose the darkest secret of all, one that would reveal who had been really pulling the strings of Emily's life, and why the truth about that diary was more dangerous than anyone could imagine.
Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Emily stumbled out of room 304, clutching the folder and diary against her chest. Her mind reeled, unable to process the avalanche of revelations. The hallway stretched before her like a tunnel, the vintage sconces casting shadows that seemed to reach for her. She needed to think. She needed space. But more than that, she needed answers she could verify independently. Everything Margaret had told her could be another manipulation, another layer of lies designed to draw Emily into whatever twisted game she was playing. The elevator ride back to the lobby felt eternal. When the doors finally opened, Emily was surprised to find David standing at the reception desk, his phone pressed against his ear. He looked agitated, his free hand gesturing sharply as he spoke in a low, urgent voice. Emily approached slowly, her professional mask slipping back into place through force of habit. David noticed her and abruptly ended his call, sliding his phone into his pocket with a too casual motion that set off alarm bells in Emily's mind. "Everything okay with Mrs. Sullivan?" David asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Fine," Emily lied. "She just needed towels." David nodded, but his eyes darted to the folder in Emily's hands. "What's that?" "Nothing. Just some documents she wanted me to copy for her." The lie came easily, surprisingly so. When had she become someone who lied so smoothly? At this hour? David's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The business center's closed." "I told her I'd do it tomorrow." Emily moved behind the reception desk, needing the familiar barrier between herself and David's suddenly unsettling presence. "I'm going to finish up some paperwork. You can head home if you want." "Actually, I need to talk to you about something." David leaned against the desk. His body language was casual, but his expression serious. "How long have you known Margaret Sullivan?" The question caught Emily off guard. "I don't know her. She's just a guest." "Really?" David pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "Because hotel security footage shows her standing across the street from the Grandview on multiple occasions over the past month, just standing there, watching, 3 weeks before she checked in." Emily's grip tightened on the folder. "Why were you looking at security footage from a month ago?" "Because I've been here for 15 years, Emily. I know when something's off. And Margaret Sullivan is off. She's been asking staff questions about you. Casual questions, but pointed. What time you work, where you take your breaks, whether you're close with your family." David's eyes narrowed. "So I'm going to ask you again, how do you know her?" Emily's mind raced. Should she tell David about the diary, about Margaret's claims, about the documents in the folder suggesting her adoptive father had been a criminal? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from an unknown number. "Don't trust the lawyer. Come back to 304 immediately. Your life depends on it. M." Emily stared at the message. How had Margaret gotten her number? More disturbingly, what did she mean about Emily's life depending on returning to the room? Another text appeared. "The man claiming to be Robert Thornton is not who he says he is. Check the Washington State Bar Association website. There is no attorney by that name at that firm."
Emily's hand shook as she pulled up the website on her phone. She searched for Robert Thornton at the Seattle law firm listed on the business card. No results. She expanded the search to all attorneys named Robert Thornton in Washington state. 3 results appeared, none matching the man standing in front of her. She looked up slowly. The man who called himself Robert Thornton watched her with an expression that had shifted from professional courtesy to something colder, more calculating. "Who are you really?" Emily asked. His facade cracked slightly. "I think we should discuss this privately." "I think you should leave," David interjected, moving protectively closer to Emily. "Now." But the man made no move to go. Instead, he reached into his briefcase. Emily tensed, half expecting a weapon. But he withdrew another folder, this one much thicker than the one Margaret had given her. "You want answers, Emily? Real answers? About your adoption? About your biological mother? About why she really gave you up?" He placed the folder on the desk. "It's all here. Margaret Sullivan has been lying to you since the moment you found that diary, but then lying runs in her family." "Don't listen to him," came a voice from behind them. Margaret stood near the elevator, breathless as if she had run down the stairs. "He's dangerous. He's been following me for weeks." The man, whoever he really was, smiled without humor. "Following you? You're the one who came to Portland. You're the one who manipulated your way into Emily's life. I'm just here to clean up your mess. Again." "You know each other," Emily said, looking between them. It wasn't a question. Margaret's face had gone pale. "He's my brother. Emily, meet your uncle, Richard Sullivan." Richard's smile widened. "She didn't tell you about me, did she? About the family you come from. Margaret's been spinning you a tale of tragic poverty and noble sacrifice, but the truth is much simpler and much worse." "Shut up," Margaret said desperately, moving toward the desk. "Richard, please, we agreed?" "You agreed to stay away from her. That was the deal 37 years ago. You got your money, and Emily got a life far away from the Sullivan family circus. But you couldn't leave well enough alone." Emily felt like she was watching a tennis match, her head swiveling between the siblings as pieces of a puzzle she didn't understand began emerging from the fog. "What money?" Emily demanded. Richard opened his folder and pulled out a document. "Your adoptive parents paid Margaret $50,000 for you. Not an adoption agency, Margaret directly. It was illegal then, and it would be illegal now. Your whole adoption was essentially a black market transaction." "That's not true," Margaret's voice cracked. "I needed the money to survive. I was homeless, Emily. I had nothing." "You were homeless because you'd blown through your inheritance gambling," Richard said coldly. "You weren't some tragic victim of circumstance. You were an addict who sold your baby to fund your habit." The words hit Emily like physical blows. She gripped the edge of the desk to keep from swaying. Margaret was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. "I was sick. I needed help. But your grandparents," she looked at Emily, "they were ashamed of me. They cut me off. Richard here made sure of that." "I made sure you didn't destroy the family name more than you already had. Mom and Dad gave you chance after chance. You stole from them. You stole from me. You would have sold anything that wasn't nailed down to feed your addiction. So yes, when you got pregnant and asked for money, I found you buyers instead." Emily's stomach turned. "You arranged the adoption?" "I arranged a transaction," Richard corrected. "The Carters wanted a baby, they were willing to pay, and they didn't ask too many questions about the legality of it. Margaret needed money. Everyone got what they wanted."
"Except Emily," David said quietly. He'd been silent throughout the confrontation, but now he stepped forward. "She got sold like property." "She got a better life than Margaret could have ever given her," Richard said. "Look at you, Emily. You're healthy, educated, employed. You turned out fine. If Margaret had kept you, you'd probably be as much of a disaster as she is." Margaret lunged at her brother, but David stepped between them.
The lobby had become a pressure cooker of emotion and revelation. Everything Emily had believed about her life systematically destroyed in the space of minutes. "Stop," Emily said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Everyone just stop." The room fell silent. Emily looked at Margaret, then at Richard, then at David, whose expression held sympathy and something else. Guilt. "David," Emily said slowly, "why were you really looking at security footage from a month ago? How did you even know to look for Margaret specifically?" David's face went carefully blank. "I told you. Something seemed off." "No." Emily's mind was working furiously now, connecting dots she'd been too overwhelmed to see before. "You knew who she was before she checked in. You've been watching her, watching us." She took a step back. "You've been part of this from the beginning." David's silence was confirmation enough. Richard laughed, a harsh sound without joy. "Oh, this is rich. She doesn't know?" "What don't? What else is there? What else has been a lie?" David's shoulders slumped. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with resignation. "My name isn't David Chen. It's David Carter. I'm your brother, your adoptive brother. And I've been watching over you for the past 15 years because our father, your adoptive father, made me promise to protect you before he died." The world stopped spinning. The lobby, with its elegant fixtures and polished surfaces, seemed to tilt and blur. Emily reached for the desk to steady herself, but her hands found only air. She stumbled, and David Carter, caught her arm. "Don't touch me," Emily jerked away. "You've been lying to me for 15 years?" "I've been protecting you," David insisted. "Our father knew his past might catch up with him someday. He knew that people he'd defrauded might come for revenge. After he died, after he was murdered, our mother was terrified they'd come for you next. She was already sick, getting worse. She begged me to stay close, to watch over you, so I did. By becoming my boss, by seeing me every day and pretending to be a stranger, I mourned you. You disappeared when I was 15, right after Dad died. Mom said you'd moved to California for college. I thought you had abandoned us. I thought you didn't care." "I cared too much," David said. "That's why I had to disappear and come back as someone else. The people who killed Dad were looking for anyone connected to him. If I'd stayed as your brother, I would have led them right to you. But as your manager, I could keep you safe without putting you at risk." Emily looked around the lobby at the 3 people she'd thought she'd understood. Margaret, who claimed to be her biological mother but had stalked her and staged an elaborate manipulation. Richard, her supposed uncle, who had sold her as a baby and now appeared with his own agenda. And David, her brother, who had spent 15 years living a lie to protect her from threats she'd never known existed. "I don't know any of you," Emily whispered. "I don't know anyone anymore." "You know yourself," Margaret said, her voice gentle despite everything. "And that's what matters. I know I did this all wrong. I know I hurt you. But Emily, everything in that diary, my feelings, my love for you, that was real. I was a disaster then, and I'm still trying to fix my mistakes now, but you deserve to know where you came from." "And now you do," Richard added. "You come from a family of liars, addicts, and criminals, the Sullivans and the Carters. Both. My sister sold you, your adoptive father was a con man, and here we all are still lying and manipulating. It's in your blood, Emily. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Emily looked at the folders on the desk, at the diary that started this nightmare, at the faces of 3 people connected to her by blood or circumstance or elaborate deception. She thought about her adoptive mother who had died still keeping secrets, about the life she'd built on a foundation of lies, about the person she thought she was versus the person these revelations suggested she might be. But there was one more secret buried in those documents. One final revelation that would change everything Emily thought she knew about her adoption, her family, and the real reason everyone had been lying to her for 28 years. And this secret, it was worth killing for.
Emily's hands moved almost without conscious thought, reaching for the thick folder Richard had placed on the desk. She needed something concrete, something she could verify, something that couldn't be another layer of manipulation and lies. "Don't," Richard said sharply, but Emily had already opened it. The first document was a birth certificate,
her birth certificate. But the name listed under mother wasn't Margaret Sullivan. It was Linda Sullivan. Emily looked up sharply. Who's Linda? Margaret's face had gone ashen. Richard's expression shifted to something that might have been regret. David moved closer, looking over Emily's shoulder at the document. Linda was our sister, Richard said quietly. Margaret's twin, and your actual biological mother. The lobby seemed to contract, air becoming thick and hard to breathe. Emily stared at Margaret, who wouldn't meet her eyes. You lied about being my mother, Emily said, her voice eerily calm. Everything. The diary, the story, all of it. No, Margaret said desperately. I mean, yes, but not the way you think. Linda was my twin. We were identical. When she got pregnant, she was only 22. She wasn't ready. She was scared. Our parents had just died in a car accident 6 months earlier, and Linda was struggling with the grief. She couldn't handle a baby. So you pretended to be her. You wrote a diary as her. You created this whole narrative. Linda wrote the diary. Those entries are real. But she died 3 days after you were born. Complications from the delivery. She never got the chance to give you up herself. Never got to say goodbye. So I did it for her. I found a couple willing to pay. You found me a couple willing to pay? Richard interrupted. Margaret had nothing to do with the adoption arrangement. She was too busy getting high to care about her dead sister's baby. Margaret flinched as if struck. That's not fair. I was grieving. I was lost. Yes, I had problems, but I still cared about Linda's baby. I cared about you. Emily felt numb, as if her emotional circuit breakers had finally overloaded and shut down completely. My mother is dead. My real mother. She's been dead my entire life. Yes, Richard said. Linda Sullivan died on March 18, 1987, 3 days after giving birth to you. She held you once, wrote those diary entries in the hospital, and then she was gone. Internal bleeding that the doctors caught too late. Emily's legs gave out. She sank into the desk chair, her vision swimming. David crouched beside her, his hand hovering near her shoulder but not touching. Why didn't anyone tell me? Emily whispered. Why let me think Margaret was my mother? Because the adoption was illegal, David said gently. If anyone had investigated, they would have discovered that Linda died before the adoption paperwork was filed. Margaret forged Linda's signature on the documents. Richard arranged the whole thing off the books. Our parents, the Carters, knew they were buying a baby from questionable sources, but they wanted a child so badly they didn't ask questions. And when your adoptive father started getting into legal trouble years later, he became paranoid that someone would dig into his past and discover the illegal adoption. That's why David here was recruited to watch over you, not just because of the people your father defrauded, but because of the adoption itself. Emily looked at David, her brother, the stranger. Did Mom know, my adoptive mother? David nodded. She knew everything. The illegal adoption, Dad's criminal activities, my real identity. She lived with the fear that it would all come crashing down. That's part of what made her sick. The stress, the secrets, the constant anxiety. So she died with all these lies too, Emily said bitterly. Everyone I've ever loved has lied to me. We lied to protect you, David insisted. No, Emily snapped. You lied to protect yourselves, to hide your crimes, to avoid consequences. Emily stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the marble floor. Every single one of you used me. Margaret, you used me to assuage your guilt over your sister's death. Richard, you used me as a commodity, a transaction. David, you used me as a job, a responsibility you couldn't escape. And my parents used me to fill a void in their lives while building their happiness on an illegal ground. Emily, Margaret reached out, but Emily stepped back. Don't. Just don't. Emily grabbed the diary, both folders, and her bag. I'm done. With all of you. With this hotel. With these lies. Where are you going? David asked, concern evident in his voice. Away from here.
Away from you. I need to think. I need to figure out who I actually am when I'm not surrounded by people lying to me. There's more, Richard said. More you need to know before you leave. Of course there is, Emily laughed, a jagged sound. There's always more. What else could possibly— Your adoptive father didn't die in an accident, Richard interrupted, and he wasn't murdered by someone he defrauded. Emily froze halfway to the door. What are you talking about? The police said what they were told to say, what they were paid to say. Your father's death wasn't revenge. It was murder, yes, but the person who killed him was Linda. The words made no sense. Linda's dead. She died when I was born. Linda's twin died, Richard said carefully. Margaret's twin sister, Linda Sullivan, died in 1987. But there was another Linda, Linda Carter, David and Emily's older sister. The floor seemed to drop away beneath Emily's feet. What? David's face had gone white. Richard, don't— She deserves to know everything, Richard said firmly. He turned back to Emily. Your adoptive father didn't die in an accident. And he wasn't murdered by someone he defrauded. Emily froze halfway to the door. What are you talking about? The police said what they were told to say, what they were paid to say. Your father's death wasn't revenge. It was murder, yes. But the person who killed him was Linda. The words made no sense. Linda's dead. She died when I was born. Linda's twin died, Richard said carefully. Margaret's twin sister, Linda Sullivan, died in 1987, but there was another Linda, Linda Carter, David and Emily's older sister. The floor seemed to drop away beneath Emily's feet. What? David's face had gone white. Richard, don't— She deserves to know everything, Richard said firmly. He turned back to Emily. Your adopted father didn't die in an accident. And he wasn't murdered by someone you defrauded. Your father's death wasn't revenge. It was murder, yes. But the person who killed him was Linda. The words made no sense. Linda's dead. She died when I was born. Linda's twin sister, Linda Sullivan, died in 1987. But there was another Linda, Linda Carter, David and Emily's older sister. The floor seemed to drop away beneath Emily's feet. What? David's face had gone white. Richard, don't— She deserves to know everything, Richard said firmly. He turned back to Emily. Your adopted father had another daughter before they adopted you. Linda Carter. She was 7 when they brought you home. She was 12 when your father died. Emily shook her head. That's impossible. I would remember. I would know if I had a sister. You're only 12 yourself when it happened, David said quietly. And after Dad died, after the accident, Linda was sent away to a psychiatric facility. Mom told you she'd gone to live with relatives. You were dealing with Dad's death, and Mom was trying to protect you from the truth. What truth? Emily demanded. What did Linda do? David and Richard exchanged glances. Margaret had sunk into one of the lobby chairs, her face buried in her hands. Finally, David spoke. Linda found out about the illegal adoption. She was smart, curious, always snooping through Dad's things. She found documents, records, proof that you weren't legally their daughter. She confronted Dad, and he tried to explain, but Linda was young. She didn't understand the nuances. All she heard was that her father had bought a baby, that you weren't really her sister, that their whole family was built on a crime. And she killed him for it? Emily's voice was hollow. She tampered with his car, David said quietly. She didn't understand the full consequences. She just wanted to hurt him, to punish him. She didn't think he'd actually die. When he did, she had a complete breakdown. The guilt destroyed her. She was institutionalized, and she's been in care ever since. Emily felt like she was falling through space with no ground in sight. I have another sister? A sister who killed our father? And no one thought to mention this? She's not capable of functioning in society, Richard said. She'll spend the rest of her life in supervised care. Mom decided it was better for you not to know. Better for you to remember Dad as a victim of circumstance rather than the target of his own daughter's rage.
Better for me, Emily repeated numbly. Everyone keeps making decisions about what's better for me, selling me, lying to me, hiding murders and mental illness and illegal adoptions, all for my own good. She moved toward the door with renewed purpose. Emily, wait, Margaret called out. Please, I know this is overwhelming, but you can't just leave. We need to figure this out together. Together? Emily turned, and the look on her face made Margaret shrink back. We're not together. We're not family. We're strangers connected by crimes and lies and trauma. That's not a foundation for anything. Then what about the diary? Margaret asked desperately. Your real mother, Linda Sullivan, wrote those words. She loved you. That was real. Doesn't that mean anything? Emily looked down at the worn leather diary in her hands. The diary that had started this nightmare. The diary that represented the one genuine piece of love in this tangled web of deception. It means my mother loved me for 3 days. 3 days, and then she died. And everyone who came after her turned that love into a weapon, a tool, a manipulation. So no, it doesn't mean anything anymore. You all made sure of that. The front door of the hotel swung open, and a woman entered, shaking rain from her umbrella. She was perhaps 40, with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. She looked around the tent scene in the lobby and cleared her throat. Emily Carter, she asked. Emily turned, wary. Who are you? The woman reached into her bag and produced official identification. My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I'm a psychiatrist at Riverview Psychiatric Hospital. I'm here about your sister, Linda. The hits just kept coming. Emily almost laughed. Of course you are. Let me guess. She's dying? She wants to see me? There's some final revelation that will shatter what's left of my world? Dr. Mitchell's expression was sympathetic but serious. Actually, Linda escaped from the facility 3 days ago. We've been searching for her, and we have reason to believe she's in Portland. We believe she may be looking for you. The lobby fell silent. Emily felt David tense beside her, saw Richard's hand move toward his briefcase, noticed Margaret's sharp intake of breath. Why would she come looking for me? Emily asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Because she found out about the diary, about Margaret's attempts to contact you. Linda has been following the situation obsessively from the facility. She has internet access for therapy purposes, and she's been tracking everything, social media, public records, everything. When she learned that Margaret was in Portland, that the truth about your adoption might come out, something in her snapped. She became convinced that she needed to protect you from the Sullivan family, that she needed to finish what she started 20 years ago. Finish what she started, Emily repeated slowly. You mean killing people connected to my adoption? Dr. Mitchell nodded gravely. Linda's psychosis has evolved over the years. She's built an entire narrative in her mind where she's the protector, the guardian angel who cleanses your life of anyone who hurt you. We found journals in her room, plans. She's been preparing for this for months. Richard stood abruptly. I need to leave, now. You're on her list, Dr. Mitchell confirmed. You arranged the illegal adoption. In Linda's mind, you're one of the primary villains, as is Margaret. She looked at Margaret, whose face had gone gray. I've contacted the Portland police. They're sending officers, but in the meantime, I suggest everyone stay together in a public space. This hotel isn't safe, David said immediately. If Linda knows Emily works here, this is the first place she'll look. As if summoned by the words, the lights in the lobby flickered once, twice. Then they went out completely, plunging the space into darkness, broken only by the gray glow from the street windows. The backup generator should kick in, David said, moving toward the utility panel behind the desk. They always... A sound cut through the darkness, the distinctive ding of the elevator arriving. Everyone froze. The elevator doors slid open with their characteristic mechanical whisper. A figure stood silhouetted in the elevator's emergency lighting, small, slight, wearing a dark hooded jacket. Hello, Emily, the figure said, and Emily heard her own childhood in that voice, the voice of the sister she'd forgotten, the sister who'd been erased from her memory, the sister who killed for her once and apparently intended to do so again. Linda Carter stepped out of the elevator and the emergency lights revealed what she held in her hands. A gun.
I've been waiting so long to see you again, Linda said, her voice eerily calm. My baby sister, I've missed you so much. But don't worry, I'm here now, and I'm going to fix everything. I'm going to make our family clean again. The gun raised, pointing past Emily toward Margaret, starting with her.
Everything happened in fragments, seconds stretching and compressing like time itself had become unstable. David lunged forward, shouting Linda's name. Dr. Mitchell dropped her bag and raised her hands in a placating gesture. Richard dove behind the reception desk. Margaret remained frozen in her chair, eyes locked on the gun. But Emily moved faster than any of them. She didn't think. Thinking would have paralyzed her. Instead, she acted on pure instinct, stepping directly between Linda and Margaret, her hands raised. "Linda," Emily said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'm Emily, your sister. Look at me." Linda's gun wavered, her focus shifting from Margaret to Emily. In the dim emergency lighting, Emily could finally see her sister's face, and it was like looking at a ghost. Linda had Emily's eyes, their father's nose, their mother's chin. She was family in a way none of the others were. Blood, truth, real. "I know who you are," Linda said, and her voice cracked with emotion. "I've always known, even when they tried to make me forget. Even when they said I was sick and confused, I remembered my little sister. I remembered holding you when Mom and Dad first brought you home. I remembered loving you." "I believe you," Emily said, taking a small step forward. She was close enough now to potentially grab the gun, but she made no move to do so. Linda said, "Did you know, when you were a baby, our dad lied to all of us. He brought home a baby he bought on the black market, and he expected us to pretend everything was normal. He made our whole family a crime." "So you killed him," Emily said gently. "When you were 12 years old, you killed our father." Linda's face crumpled. "I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to. I just wanted him to stop lying. I wanted him to tell the truth. I thought if I sabotaged his car, he'd have to stay home. He'd have to talk to us. I didn't know the brakes would fail completely. I didn't know he'd crash." Tears streamed down Linda's face, but her gun hand remained steady. "I've lived with that guilt every day for 16 years, every single day. The doctors said I was sick, that I needed help, that I'd hurt the family. But I was trying to help. I was trying to protect you, Emily, from Dad, from them, from everyone who hurt you." "I know you were trying to protect me," Emily said, "but Linda, you can't kill for me. That's not protection. That's not love. That's more violence on top of violence." "They deserve it," Linda insisted. "Margaret sold you. Richard arranged it. They turned you into a commodity. And now they're back, trying to manipulate you again. I saw the news articles about Margaret checking into this hotel. I saw the social media posts. I knew what she was planning. I couldn't let her hurt you again." "She hasn't hurt me, and it was partly true. She is confused and manipulative and broken, but she hasn't actually hurt me, not physically. The only person who's hurt people is—" Emily stopped, choosing her words carefully. "The only person who's used violence is you, and I know you did it because you love me. But Linda, I need you to stop now. I need you to put down the gun." "I can't," Linda whispered. "If I put it down, they'll take me back to that place. They'll lock me up again. I'll never see you. I'll never get to be your sister." "You'll always be my sister," Emily said, her voice breaking. "Nothing can change that. Not adoption, not lies, not even time. We share blood.
We share a father and mother. We share history, even if I don't remember it. That's real. That's true. But if you pull that trigger, you destroy any chance we have of actually being sisters. You destroy any chance of us building something real." Behind Emily, she heard Margaret sobbing quietly. She heard David's tense breathing, Dr. Mitchell's calm, clinical voice speaking softly into a phone, probably to the police, and she heard Richard's ragged gasps behind the desk. But Emily kept her eyes on Linda, on the sister she didn't remember, but who had shaped her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. "I have a question. If you love me, if you want to protect me, then tell me, what happens after you shoot Margaret? What happens after you shoot Richard? Where does the violence end?" Linda blinked, confusion crossing her face. "It ends when you're safe, when the people who hurt you are gone." "But I'll never be safe. Don't you see? If you kill for me, I become complicit in murder. I become part of the violence. The trauma doesn't end. It just transfers to me. You'd be giving me the same guilt that's been destroying you for 16 years. Is that really what you want for your little sister?" Linda's gun hand began to shake. I didn't. "I know you didn't," Emily said gently. "You've been sick. Linda, you've been in pain, and no one helped you process what happened with Dad. They just locked you away and hoped you'd disappear. But you didn't disappear. You survived. And now you have a choice. You can end this cycle of violence, or you can perpetuate it. What kind of sister do you want to be?" For a long moment, the lobby was silent, except for the sound of rain against the windows and Linda's ragged breathing. The gun wavered, lowering slightly, then rising again. Emily saw the war playing out across her sister's face, between the illness and the sanity, between the violence and the love, between the past and the possibility of a future. Finally, slowly, Linda's arm dropped. The gun clattered to the marble floor. "I'm so tired," Linda whispered. "I'm so tired of hurting." Emily closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around her sister. Linda collapsed against her, sobbing with the force of 16 years of grief and guilt and pain, finally released. Dr. Mitchell moved forward carefully, securing the gun and speaking quietly into her phone. David turned the emergency lights to full power, flooding the lobby with harsh illumination. Margaret remained in her chair, shaking. Richard slowly emerged from behind the desk. But Emily held her sister and let her cry. "I'm here," Emily murmured. "I'm your sister, and I'm here. You're not alone anymore." Through the front windows, Emily saw the flash of police lights approaching. She knew what came next. Linda would be taken back to the facility. There would be legal proceedings, psychiatric evaluations, probably criminal charges for the escape and the weapon. The system would swallow her sister again. But something had changed. Some essential truth had been spoken. Some cycle had been interrupted. The police entered, professional and efficient. Dr. Mitchell explained the situation, her credentials and authority smoothing the process. Linda went quietly, looking back at Emily with an expression that held both sorrow and something that might have been peace. "I'll come visit," Emily called out, as her sister was led away. "I promise. I'll come visit and we'll talk. We'll figure this out together." Linda nodded, tears still streaming down her face, and then she was gone.
The lobby emptied slowly. The police took statements from everyone. Richard left as soon as he was cleared, muttering something about lawyers and liability. Margaret lingered, looking lost and small and old. David approached Emily carefully. "Are you okay?"
Emily laughed, a sound without humor. I have no idea who I am anymore. My entire life has been revealed as a lie. My father was a criminal who was murdered by my sister who I didn't know existed. My mother, both my mothers, are dead. My biological aunt pretended to be my mother and stalked me for 5 years. My brother faked his identity for 15 years to protect me from threats I didn't know about. And my other sister just tried to kill people in my name. So no, David, I'm not okay. But I'm alive. And right now, that feels like enough. David nodded, understanding in his eyes. What are you going to do? Emily looked around the lobby, at the hotel where her biological mother had worked, where her aunt had planted a diary, where her life had been systematically deconstructed and rebuilt in the space of a few hours. I'm going to leave Portland, she said. I need space. I need time. I need to figure out who Emily Carter actually is when she's not defined by other people's lies and crimes and agendas. Where will you go? I have no idea yet. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can think. Somewhere I can start over. She looked at her brother. And I need you to not follow me. I need you to not protect me or watch over me or manage me. I need you to let me go and trust that I'll be okay on my own. David's face tightened with concern, but he nodded. Okay, but you'll stay in touch? You let me know you're safe? Eventually, when I'm ready, but not yet. Right now, I need to be alone. Margaret approached hesitantly. Emily, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please know that I'm sorry for everything. For the manipulation, the lies, the stalking. I convinced myself I was trying to connect with you, but really I was just trying to assuage my own guilt about Linda, about your real mother. She was my twin. When she died, part of me died. And when you survived, I wanted so badly to be part of your life, to have some piece of Linda back. But I went about it all wrong. Emily studied Margaret's face, the face that was genetically identical to her biological mother's face, the face of the woman who had given birth to her and died 3 days later. Did Linda, my mother, did she really write that diary? Every word. I've kept it all these years. Those entries are her voice, her heart, her love for you. That part was never a lie. Emily pulled the diary from her bag and held it for a moment. Then she handed it back to Margaret. Keep it. It's your sister's. It belongs to you. I don't need it anymore. But I don't need a diary to tell me my mother loved me. I know she did. She loved me enough to write those words in the 3 days she had. That's enough. That's real. Everything that came after, the illegal adoption, the lies, the violence, none of that is about her love. That's about other people's choices. And I'm choosing to not carry their guilt anymore. Margaret clutched the diary to her chest, tears streaming down her weathered face. What about us? Is there any chance we could— No, Emily said, not unkindly. There's no relationship to build here. You're not my mother. You're a stranger who shares some DNA with a woman I never got to know. That's not enough to overcome what you've done. Maybe someday I'll be ready to talk to you again, but not now. Maybe not ever. Margaret nodded, accepting the verdict with the resignation of someone who knew she deserved exactly this outcome. Emily walked out of the Grandview Hotel at 2 a.m. The rain had stopped, leaving the Portland streets washed clean and glistening under the streetlights. She had no plan, no destination, only a backpack with a few essentials and a determination to find herself outside the narratives others had constructed around her. As she walked, she thought about identity, how much of who we are is determined by the stories we're told about ourselves, and how much is intrinsic, unchangeable, real. She'd been Emily Carter, adopted daughter, for 28 years. She'd been Emma Sullivan, biological daughter, for 3 days. She'd been a sister to David, though she didn't know it for most of her life. She'd been a sister to Linda, though she had no memory of those early years. But stripped of all those stories, all those relationships, all those lies and truths and half-truths, who was she? The question didn't terrify her the way it might have a few hours ago. Instead, it felt liberating. She was a blank page. She could write her own story now, unburdened by the weight of other people's guilt and secrets and manipulations. Emily Carter walked through the quiet Portland streets, past closed shops and sleeping buildings, towards whatever came next. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't know who she would become. But for the first time in her life, those unknowns felt like possibilities instead of threats. Behind her, the Grandview Hotel stood silent, holding its secrets and its ghosts. Inside, David watched from a window as his sister disappeared into the night, respecting her request for space even as every protective instinct screamed at him to follow. In her room, Margaret sat on the bed holding a diary written by her dead twin, mourning both the sister she'd lost and the niece she'd never truly have. And somewhere in the space between all their stories, the truth existed. Messy, complicated, painful, but finally visible.
Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.